welcome back to sunny Snetterton for the final race in the 2021 GT Cup Championship. The overall title will be decided in this pit stop race, so it's exciting stuff to come. More about that in a moment. First of all, here's a reminder of what happened earlier on today.
Round 23 of the GT Cup Championship for 2021 is heading in 2x2 order up to the lights. Sam Neary and Steve Burgess there on the front row of the grid. The Group GT3 Mercedes, the Group GTO Radical. Lights go out and we go away and racing for the penultimate time this season up towards Ritchie's Corner, and the extra straight line speed of the Group GTO Radical propels Steve Burgess into the lead of the race, side by side further down through the order, but everybody again just being sensible with this capacity grid over the course of this weekend. And Burgess already under pressure from BRDC Rising Star. Sam Neary, who at the wheel of the Team ABBA Mercedes, is looking to try and pick up on the overall race lead. It looks as though John Dillon has slotted himself through into third position, but Sam Neary now trying around the outside of Palmer in a straight line. The Radical should have the speed, but there's contact, I'm afraid. That is Mike Price that is off, and also James Simons is off at the wheel of his Group GTC Lamborghini, as we are side by side for the lead of the race. And has Sam Neary done enough here to pick up the lead? No, still he's not having it, Steve Burgess. Sam Neary now though has the inside line for the next corner, so I think the inevitable is going to happen, and indeed has happened. Sam Neary picks up the lead of the race, braving it out around the outside at 2 or 3 consecutive corners. So safety car, having only just gone into the pit lane, just having started the race, is already now picking up our race leader Sam Neary, who heads over the start finish line as the Team Orange with JMH crew inspects the damage to the left rear of Simon Orange's car, but I suspect with suspension damage or toe links broken that is going to be it for that car. They will not be able to do anything other than assess the damage. And that's a spin, and that's the car that was leading Group GTA. Damage to the front, I'm afraid to say, of Stephen Walton's Make It Happen Racing Ginetta. The silver and light green Lamborghini of Warren Gilbert has now picked up the Group GTC lead, and that could be important for the championship for Warren Gilbert. So he leads the group. That's potentially maximum championship points for him. There, Greg Caton still sticking his elbows out to try and prevent the car of Morgan Tilbrook from firing his way through, but a small mistake there going in towards Oggies has allowed Morgan Tilbrook up the inside of the GCAT Racing Porsche, and through he goes. Morgan Tilbrook picks up what is going to be 4th position. The Porsche drops down into 5th place as they start to build the speeds and the momentum again all the way down the Bentley Straight. Mo Ritson was driving the car in the sprint race and now looking to try and make it back-to-back group wins if they can, but Josh Jackson has got other ideas as he tries it around the outside at Ritchie's Corner. Need to be careful. He's going to try and cut back on the exit. Tom Rawlings is wise to that and covers it off as they head into the braking area for the tight right-hand hairpin at Wilson. Get cleanly off the corner is what they'll need to try and do now, and Tom Rawlings I think is going to feel the pressure here and the squeeze from Josh Jackson, who's moving around trying to do anything to try and put off Tom Rawlings that lies ahead, but a good squabble it is. Off has gone James Guess. It has been a rotten weekend for Feathers Motorsport. James Guess had a spin coming out of Palmer yesterday and then had contact whilst he tried to rejoin the circuit. He's had a spin going into Palmer today, and that is going to undo all of the hard work that he had been doing, I'm afraid. And Morgan Tilbrook's done it. He's managed to unlock the door. He's got himself on the podium, and that is at the expense of John Dillon, I'm afraid to say. Coming out of the final corner now comes Sam Neary. He is on course, and Team ABBA Racing for yet another win in the GT Cup Championship. Over the start-finish line comes Sam Neary. That's exactly what they wanted to do, to claim maximum points in their group, and that potentially moves them another step closer to the championship as we head into the pit stop race later on today. That will be the final round of the championship. Steve Burgess grabs the checkered flag in 2nd place, so he will take the win in group.
So, on the podium together, but of course there's still all to play for, isn't there, for this championship title?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really tough. I think we haven't worked it out exactly, but I think we need them not to finish and not to get 70% of the race. But either way, it's been fantastic to get down to the wire. And these guys, both Sam and Richard, just fantastic competitors. Sam has spent time with Charlotte, with lines and things, and people just don't have to do that. It's been great. So, you know, we're happy either way.
Yeah, it's been an incredible title fight, and I'm really glad it's gone down to the final race. You know, it's really made it interesting. I couldn't ask for a better competitor to be racing the whole time. Warren always keeps it fair, there's no dirty tactics, and at the end of the day we always come back and have a beer together. So no, it's really happy to be racing Warren, and hopefully we can both have a good final race.
Well, the cars are leaving the pit lane, getting ready to head out to the grid. Now, there's lots of classes, groups within GT Cup. It's not all about the overall championship. And someone who was on the podium just now for the sprint race for GTA, and who's had a great season, is local driver James Townsend, who I managed to catch up with a bit earlier. James Townsend, this is your local circuit, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Very happy to be here.
Yeah. And even more special because it's a bit of an anniversary for you, isn't it, today?
It is, yeah. My 75th competitive race. So, yeah, really excited to get stuck in.
Now, is that just in GT Cup or?
No, a variety of things. So everything from Ginettas right at the beginning through to Carrera Cup a couple of years ago and then GT Cup this year.
And so how have you found this season with GT Cup? Because you're racing the Ginetta, obviously.
Yeah, it's been mega. It's obviously had a very different dynamic having two drivers and a pit stop race. Something we're getting used to, but really excited and really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And how are you feeling about the season finale?
It's good. We're still in the mix for third in the championship, so we're pushing hard for that. Always excited to be at Snetterton. I've got a lot of family coming down, so looking forward to seeing everyone.
Brilliant. And I have to say, you cranked up the music for me as well today, as promised, didn't you?
Yeah, we do our best. We like to try and get a bit of an atmosphere going, and pump up Ian especially. He really likes a bit of old rock, so it's good.
Brilliant. Good luck.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, fantastic to hear from the drivers there, and being a radio DJ and someone that's hugely into rock, I'm sure Michelle will have enjoyed that as well. So the cars making their way out onto the circuit, and hopefully Michelle might have the opportunity to catch up with a driver or two.
Yes, not just yet, because there's no cars here at the moment. But yeah, I was very pleased about the music choice in that garage, I have to say, garage number 6. Mark, can we just talk about the groups at the moment? Because am I right in thinking that some of the groups, actually I think all of them now, including GTO, have been decided in terms of winners?
Well, GTO, we could say at the moment, the way things are, hasn't been decided because this race hasn't started. All of the other groups, the champion is decided. But as long as Paul Bailey starts this race, he picks up 20 bonus points, and that would be enough. In terms of the overall championship, Sam and Richard Neary coming to this race on 514.5 points. Jensen Lunn and Warren Gilbert on 482.5. So there's a 32-point gap between the pair of them. If Warren Gilbert starts this race, he picks up the extra 20 points for starting in the final 8 races. Those extra points won't go the way of Sam and Richard Neary because they didn't start one of the races at Donington Park. So the way it works out is if Paul Bailey starts this race, he's the Group GTO champion. That's enough for him. He lies 6th in the overall standings coming into this one. And what needs to happen is the Nearys need to retire, and Warren Gilbert really needs to make sure that he wins the group. And that's probably the only way he can overhaul the points tally of that number 88 Mercedes that, of course, will start from pole position, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely. They've just pulled in. So, yeah, they need to finish, don't they? That's
got to finish,
ultimately what they've got to do. We might have a chat with them in a minute. So that's it for the actual championship title. And we've got, of course, the pit stops, haven't we? If you could just run us through that, because there are specific windows, aren't there, for the pit stops?
There are, yeah. It works differently today. So what happens is when we have the race on the Saturday, the cars in Group 1, so that's the cars in Group GTO, Group GT3 and Group GTC, stop first. And the cars that are in Group 2, that's the cars in Group GTB, Group GTH and Group GTA, stop second. And they have separate pit windows so that the pits aren't just full of all of the cars in one go. Today it's the opposite way round. So what will happen today is that the cars in Group GTB, Group GTH and Group GTA will stop first. So they will stop between the 24th and the 29th minute of this 50-minute race. And the cars in Group GTO, Group GT3 and Group GTC, the more powerful groups, will pit when their pit window opens, which is between the 29th minute and the 35th minute of the race. And also remember, Michelle, that of course none of the pro drivers and none of the pro sporting drivers are allowed to start the car in this pit stop race. It has to be the AMs.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless, of course, you've got the 2 AMs driving, which is the case with the number 88, because we've got Richard and Sam both driving this car. And it looks like we've got Richard starting the race. Sam's just giving him a pep talk. Pulling in alongside them now, we've got Morgan Tilbrook and Martys Clutton. just getting into position, and that would complete our front row. And I think there's just a couple more cars coming through, weaving their way through, and then the grid will pretty much be ready to go. So do you know what? I'm just going to sneak in and see if I can have a quick word with Sam and Richard, because this is it, guys, isn't it? This is the ultimate. You have to finish. That's all you've got to do.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to jinx anything, but we've touched a lot of wood. So hopefully we'll just finish the race and then that's the championship sealed. So now Rich's got the job of just keeping on the black stuff, and then I've got the same job.
I was going to say, you've got the job a little bit later on to actually come across the finish line. Listen, I'm going to let you go. I've got to get off. Good luck, guys. Good luck to all our drivers in this final race of this championship. I'll hand back to you, Mark, for one last time for the grid.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Yeah, the championship started on the 10th of April at Donington Park on the national circuit with round 1. Here we are on the 3rd of October at Snetterton for the 24th and final round of the GT Cup. And we still, as the moment, don't know who is going to lift the overall championship title. It is beautifully poised. All the number 88 car needs to do is finish, but is it going to go for the overall win? They've had so many overall wins this year. Wouldn't surprise me if Richard and Sam Neary still look to try and claim this race victory overall. So the lights are on the safety car, and the cars are about to head off on their final formation lap of the 2021 championship season. So it's probably time to guide you through the grid and the way that they will line up and their success seconds as well. It is Richard Neary on the front row of the grid, and alongside is number 66 Morgan Tilbrook, with row 2 being Steve Burgess, who's got an extra 10 seconds to spend in the pit lane, and Richard Chamberlain, who's got an extra 15. Row 3 of the grid sees John Dillon line up alongside Graham Tilley, and row 4 sees Seamus Jennings in the GCAT Racing Porsche, who's got an extra 10 seconds in the pit lane, lining up alongside the Ferrari of Lauren Demise, who has an extra 15. The 5th row of the grid is Mike Brown, an extra 20 seconds in the pit lane for his Aston Martin, alongside his Warren Gilbert, who of course is in for a shout potentially of the championship. He's got an extra 10 seconds to spend in the pits. Row 6 sees the number 96 Lamborghini of Chris Kemp line up alongside the McLaren of Andre Borodin. And row 7 of the grid, Roy Millington's Ferrari, an extra 20 seconds in the pit lane alongside Paul Bailey's McLaren, also with an extra 20 seconds. Row 8 of the grid, Nick Phelps at the wheel of the Porsche has an extra 15 seconds to spend in the pit lane alongside number 1, which is Josh Jackson. And row 9 of the grid is started by Mo Ritson. He has alongside Steve Rushton in his McLaren, who's got an extra 20 seconds in the pit lane. Row 10 of the grid, David Holloway, an extra 10 seconds alongside Ian Campbell. And row 11 is where we see Charlotte Gilbert, the overall race winner in the weather-affected race yesterday, an extra 20 seconds in the pit lane alongside number 777, which is Ron Johnson. The 12th row of the grid, Ian Duggan will sit there on the 12th row alongside number 50, Carl Cavers. And row 13 is Russ Lindsay, who had their first group win in the weather-predicted race yesterday, an extra 20 seconds in the pit lane alongside Chris Murphy, who's got an extra 10. Row 14 of the grid is Richard Mason, and alongside is number 6, Alex Stevenson, who has an extra 10 seconds to spend in the pit lane. The penultimate row of the grid is Stephen Walton, an extra 15 seconds for the Make It Happen Racing Ginetta, alongside Simon Orange, who retired from the race earlier on and therefore didn't set a lap time, and it's fastest laps from race 1 that give us this grid for race number 2. And the final row of the grid should see car number 90, which is Mike Price, an extra 15 seconds on the pit lane for Mike Price. So that is the grid. That gives you the success seconds, and remember, everybody has to come into the pit lane and serve what is a 60-second pit stop, and those additional success seconds are added to that in reality. So we will see as to, at the end of this 50 minutes coming up in what are substantively better conditions than this time yesterday, as to who is going to lift the championship crown and who is going to take over becoming the champion from what was our outgoing champions, Simon Orange and Josh Jackson, who won it for Team Hard in the Ginetta last year. So we've got 2021 champions to crown very, very shortly, and it could be the Nearys from pole position, that black Mercedes. It could be on the 5th row of the grid, the silver and light green number 9 Lamborghini, but it's slightly out of Warren Gilbert's hands really, because all the Nearys need to do is finish. And remember, we also have, as long as this race gets underway and the orange McLaren starts, that gives Paul Bailey the Group GTO title for this year, because that's the only group, or class if you want, that hasn't been sorted as yet so far this year. So here we go for the final time in 2021. 2021. The GT Cup Championship is about to be unleashed on the Snetterton 300 circuit. The championship finale, lights are on, the cars head up towards the gantry and the lights go out, and it's a good start already from Sam Neary. He will charge his way up towards Ritchie's for the first time. Sam Neary leads, Morgan Tilbrook in second place, Steve Burgess in third, Richard Chamberlain fighting it out with John Dillon's Lamborghini for fourth place. I think it was the Lamborghini that made it through into fourth place, but Sam Neary out front and leading the way at this stage. The number 9 Lamborghini of Warren Gilbert making sure that he stays out of harm's way, and the McLaren has started the race of Paul Bailey, so that gives Paul Bailey and Ross Wiley now the GTO Championship for this year, because they started the race. They pick up an extra 20 championship points. They are now, subject to official confirmation, the GTO champions. So the only championship that's still up for grabs is the overall title now. Everything else is settled, and Sam Neary looking to try and pull away in the lead of the race if at all he can. Everybody else filing their way through the left-hander, and Richard Neary leading the race. Everybody else filing their way through the left-hander at what is Agostini, and then starting to thread their way up towards Hamilton. So Richard Neary leads the race, Morgan Tilbrook in second place, Steve Burgess ahead of John Dillon. Then it's Richard Chamberlain fighting away with the GCAT Racing Porsche. That will be started by Seamus Jennings. They had a great battle yesterday as well, and leading Group GTH in the early stages, I think, is Josh Jackson again at the wheel of the Orange Racing with JMH prepared McLaren, but it looks as though everybody is through the first half of that without any troubles, and I don't think any skirmishes either by the look of things. Andre Borodin in his McLaren GT3 coming under pressure from what is the newly crowned, now we could say, Group GTO champion for this year. Paul Bailey will hand over to the Scotsman Ross Wiley for part 2 of the race. Roy Millington at the wheel of his Group GTC Ferrari, also in amongst the GTH traffic at the moment, so he'll be looking to try and make some good progress. Roy, who said he thoroughly enjoyed his little squabble he was having in the race earlier on today when I caught up with him briefly over the lunch break. So lap number 1 completed. Richard Neary continuing to lead the race, looking to try and pull away from Morgan Tilbrook, and has managed to do so over the course of the first lap of the race. So there's already a bit of daylight between first and second place. It's only a second there or thereabouts, but it's going the right way as far as Richard Neary is concerned, as we concentrate on this battle that's going on for 11th and 12th at the moment. Andre Borodin at the wheel of the Greystone GT McLaren has got Paul Bailey right on his tailpipes at the moment. So through the left-hander at Palmer they thread their way, and then from there they'll be working their way as the speeds build up towards the braking area for Agostini. Onto the brakes and then through the left-hander. Nick Phelps coming under pressure as well. His Porsche has been right at the sharp end of Group GTB all season, really. And in the early stages of this one, it looks as though the number 35 car is leading Group GTB at the moment. He's got the leader of Group GTH sitting behind him, which is Josh Jackson. I thought that car had picked up the early lead in the group, and indeed it has at the moment. Josh Jackson has got a few cars between himself and the car that's second in Group GTH at the moment, so he's got a little bit of a buffer, I think, between himself and Mo Ritson, who is going to be second in Group GTH for the GT4 homologated cars, because Jackson is 14th, Mo Ritson 17th at the moment. Paul Bailey looking to attack Andre Borodin again. The extra grunt you would have thought of the McLaren, still not quite sufficient to catch and get past the slightly newer car that lies ahead, the 570 SGT3 of Andre Borodin. There goes that intergroup battle, the Group GTB leading Porsche ahead of the McLaren of Josh Jackson, and those two are evenly matched for pace, I've got to say, at this stage. Josh Jackson will hand the car over to former British GT racer Michael O'Brien. Nick Phelps will hand the car over to Dino Zamparelli for part 2 of the race. New fastest lap of the race coming in for Richard Neary on the first of the flying laps. 152.116 is out of the box fairly quickly, and he's now built a 1.2 second lead, as you can see, between himself and Morgan Tilbrook for the lead of the race. Now remember, pit window only opens at the 24th minute of the race, so it's still another 20 minutes away really before we start to see the pit window open for what are the lower grouped cars, so Group GTB, Group GTH and Group GTA. The cars that are up towards the sharp end of the race, all of those will have to pit in the second pit window today. The way it works, it evens itself out over the course of a weekend. Quicker cars pit first on the first day, but they pit second on the second day. Now there's Mo Ritson, that's the car that's second in Group GTH. Third in Group GTH is going to be Ian Campbell at the moment. So Ian Campbell, who was suffering with an ear infection yesterday and was advised not to race, looked after himself, did everything that the medical staff suggested that he did, feels slightly better today, but he's third in Group GTH at the moment and he's going beautifully well, I've got to say. Down to the bottom of the Bentley straight. Number 5, Richard Chamberlain, is rather conveniently enough in 5th position at the moment, but he's got Seamus Jennings, Graham Tilley and Laurent Demise at the wheel of the Ferrari. Queuing behind him, problems. Out of the window is the hand of Richard Chamberlain, and yet again mechanical woes have struck the Porsche 935, I'm afraid, of Richard Chamberlain, who is instantly just waving everybody by. So sensible driving from Richard, realising very quickly something was wrong with the car and is well aware of the closing speeds while he is slowing down on circuit and the quicker cars are still flat out, getting the car offline, warning the drivers, and I'm afraid he's going to be destined for the pit lane in the final race of the season, as over the start-finish line now comes the car of Seamus Jennings, who of course is now, as a result of that retirement for Richard Chamberlain, up into 5th position. So Seamus Jennings pushing hard, Morgan Tilbrook pushing even harder than everybody because he has now picked up the fastest lap of the race, 151.402, as Chamberlain heads towards the pit lane. Now this is Mike Brown coming under pressure from Warren Gilbert. This will be for 8th and 9th position at the moment. Warren Gilbert is leading Group GTC, so whilst he is, you could argue, being held up by a Group GT3 car, he doesn't really need to get past it because he's leading the group, he's on for maximum points, but there is an extra point for the fastest lap in your particular group, so Warren will want to make sure he gets a clean lap, and the best way to do that is probably get past the car that's holding you up a little bit. So onto the brakes, through the left-hand kink at Hamilton. The extra air of the GT3 car probably just being that little bit better than the Super Trofeo specification Lamborghini that runs in Group GTC that sits behind, but the Group GTC Lamborghini down the straight with less aero might have a bit more grunt. So is this going to be sufficient to haul Warren Gilbert up onto the coattails of the GT3 Aston Martin down the Bentley straight? He'll sit in the slipstream, he'll try and get as close as he can. He jinks out from behind. Is he going to draw himself alongside? He's got the inside line as they're heading towards Brundle, and he's made it through. Great stuff by Warren Gilbert, up to 8th position now for the man who, of course, is still looking to try and keep his fingers crossed that the championship title should go his way. He needs to, well, not that he'll be doing it, but the only way it can go his way is for bad luck for this car here that leads overall. And, well, at the moment, Richard Neary is still thinking about what he needs to do. He ideally wants to lead from the front. Morgan Tilbrook is pushing ever harder at the wheel of the 570S GT3 McLaren and gets very close to him as they head round through Wilson. New fastest lap last time through for Morgan Tilbrook, 1:51.118. And he's now picked up the lead of the race. So through goes Morgan Tilbrook, and I think that was probably sensible driving there from Richard Neary. He was under pressure for the overall lead, doesn't really need to get involved in a scrap. Should Morgan Tilbrook try and send one up the inside, there's a danger of there being contact between the pair. So let the car go, let the car go, let the overall win go, concentrate on the group win, and just make sure you finish. And I think that probably is what was on Richard's mind there, and I'm sure Sam would have been on the radio and just said to Dad, Father, Richard, let it go, let's make sure we stay where we need to be, and we should then still be in a position to pick up the overall title, which is at the moment heading their way. But of course, another 41 minutes, we could be looking at something entirely different. We simply don't know what lies ahead. So, since taking the lead of the race, already Morgan Tilbrook is disappearing up the road at the wheel of his McLaren. So the Enduro Motorsport McLaren leads. Second is the ABBA Racing Mercedes at this stage of the race. It looks as though in third position there's a bit of a gap between second and third place before we then see Steve Burgess sitting there in third position. John Dillon is fourth at the wheel of his Lamborghini. Seamus Jennings in the Porsche is fifth, and Graham Tilley in the Nissan is in sixth place. The lead Ferrari is seventh, Warren Gilbert is eighth, Mike Brown is ninth, and Paul Bailey is 10th, and despite the pressure, Sam Neary can still find the time to smile and relax for a split second, but intently watching the timing screen and the footage that will be going out around the circuit. Sam Neary there, so big smiles all round, whilst this car continues to lead. So Morgan Tilbrook, since taking the lead of the race, you can see has pulled away 5 seconds over Richard Neary. Now that's quite a large amount to pull away over the course of a single lap, but I hope that is not cause for concern for Richard Neary. And Richard Neary is now falling into the clutches of Steve Burgess's Radical. So Richard Neary's pace has gone off by 6 seconds compared to what he was doing earlier on in the race. He's lapping 1 minute 57s at the moment. He did a 1 minute 51.5 earlier, so I do hope that's not cause for concern for Richard Neary. This is Warren Gilbert, who is still leading his group, of course, lies second in the championship standings. Now he started this race, he will have picked up the extra 20 championship points, so in reality now the gap between the Nearys and this car here, Warren Gilbert, who's been sharing with Jensen Lunn, is just 12 points at the moment. That's all the gap is in the championship. And when you consider that we're on round 24 and there are 25 points for a win in every single one of those rounds, for it to come down to just 12 points at the end of the season is remarkably close. So Warren Gilbert sitting there in 8th position, having overtaken the Aston Martin in the early stages of the race, that of Mike Brown. He's just pulled away from that as well, so he could just concentrate on the road ahead. Doesn't need to overly worry about what's going on in his mirrors. He's got sufficient gaps that he need not worry, and that's exactly the position he wants to be in. All he can do is drive his race, Warren Gilbert. Whatever unfolds ahead of him with the Nearys is not within his possibility to overly affect. So he's just got to drive as quickly as he can and to try and ensure that he leads the group, sets the fastest lap, and then see what unfolds. And at the moment what's unfolding is that this car here, the Mercedes, not only has lost the lead of the race, it's lost second place now to Steve Burgess and the Radical that's gone through. So it still lies on the overall podium. Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Clutton are not scoring championship points for the GT3 group, so whilst Richard Neary has dropped to 3rd, he is still on for the maximum points in his group in reality, because it's an invitation class car that leads, and the car that's now in 2nd is in a different group, Group GTO, so that's fighting for different set of championship points. So sensible driving, I think, still there. I do wonder that if John Dillon's Lamborghini gets closer to the Mercedes, though, that Richard Neary will get the hurry up, because John Dillon is in GT3 and is a championship scoring car, so that is the gap that we probably need to keep an eye on. And the gap between Mercedes and Lamborghini at the moment for 3rd and 4th is around about 6 seconds, 5.9 seconds between the two of them. So if that starts to come down any further, that's when we'll start to see the Mercedes get the hurry up. And there is John Dillon in 4th position. John, who is partnered up with reigning British GT champion in the GT3 category, the Scotsman, Sandy Mitchell, for this weekend. Good to see Sandy making his debut in the series. Well, he's only 21 years of age, Sandy, but still seems to have been around for a good number of years racing GT cars. He will be taking over this number 61 Scott Sport prepared Lamborghini for part 2 of the race. Now, as we've had all weekend, the message is starting to come out now with regards to circuit limits. Black and white warning flag this time out for car number 23. That will be Ian Campbell for Greystone GT. He'll be handing the car over to his co-driver Ollie Webb for part 2 of the race. And as for that pit stop window, well, we are now about 10 minutes away from seeing the first pit window open. So remember, the Group GTB, Group GTH and Group GTA cars will be coming in. Those at the front end of the race will all have to wait for, what's that, further sort of 5 minutes after that before they'll be able to dive into the pit lane. So Warren Gilbert back over the start-finish line, running in 8th place, still hasn't overly shaken off the car that sits behind. We go on board with, by the look of things, Warren Gilbert, picking up on some of his data with the live onboard from Warren Gilbert, just showing us what's going on. And he's coming back under pressure again, isn't he, from Mike Brown at the wheel of the Ultimate Speed Aston Martin, which is out with us for, I think, the 2nd or 3rd time this season. I think it's the 2nd race meeting we've seen the Ultimate Speed Aston Martin out in. Mike Brown partnered up as ever with Matt Manderson, who've been racing together and in GT3 Aston Martins for a very good number of years now, I've got to say. So Warren Gilbert, if he comes under pressure from the Aston, there is Jensen Lunn looking on the crutches with the headset on. So that's in the Top Cats Racing garage there. Jensen still recovering from his fairly major surgery a few weeks ago. He was advised by his medical advisors not to travel here, but there was no way he was going to miss the final championship round. And remember, this is the first season of racing this particular car for Jensen Lunn and Warren Gilbert, an entirely new car to them. And talking to Jensen earlier on in the season, I said, you know, if you'd have still been in the hunt for the overall championship in a brand new car, at the final round, you'd have taken that at the beginning of the year? And he said, absolutely, absolutely. We can't have imagined we'd have had such as good a season as we've had. And he said, whatever will be, will be. If we win the championship, he'll be delighted. If we finish second, we know we've worked as hard as we could in our first year in this car. And at the moment, Warren Gilbert is still working overtime. He is trying to hang on to 8th place. If the Aston Martin slips its way through, it won't affect the point score for that Lamborghini, because the Lamborghini runs in Group GTC. The Aston Martin runs in Group GT3, so it would not take any championship points away from Warren Gilbert. So he could afford to just ease off and let the Aston Martin go through, but the team will be continually on the radio to him, just letting him know what he needs to do, and equally as much what is happening with the number 88 car of Richard Neary, which is still there in 3rd place at the moment. There's the Nissan, that's Graham Tilley. He was in 6th place. He's now dropped to 7th on that lap, so that must mean that Laurent de Meese at the wheel of the 155 FF Corsa Porsche Ferrari has gone through. So that will be place gained for the Ferrari, place lost for the Nissan, which again is another car that's been worked on over the course of this weekend. It arrived looking a little bit different to the circuit, but they've managed to repair the bits that needed repairing on it. They were still working on it on Friday when I arrived at the track as well. They've managed to get the bodywork repaired and the wrap put on it as well, so it looks absolutely pristine, the Nissan. But it's just lost a place to this car here, the Ferrari, which now means that Laurent de Meese is up to 6th overall in the race, and that will put him 5th in Group GT3. So the top 6 cars, there's only one car that's not a GT3 car, and that will be Steve Burgess in the Radical, who's currently 2nd and leads Group GTO. So down the Bentley straight they'll go. There goes John Dillon, he's in 4th. That's the gap back to Seamus Jennings in 5th. You can see the Ferrari there in 6th place. Graham Tilley in the Nissan sitting behind that, so you can see the relative gaps between them all. They are close to each other, but they're certainly not close enough to squabble for position. But Laurent de Meese, who is racing for just the 2nd time this season in the GT Cup Championship, again partnered up with Jamie Stanley. They've done a lot of racing together over the years of that pair. It's great to see them back in the series. It'd be good to see more of Laurent next year in the series. Ron Johnson moves out of harm's way there to keep the Ferrari out of the way of the race leader, who is now fully amongst the traffic there. Gets past Chris Murphy's Aston Martin. The Marshal's doing a stunning job of waving the blue flag and forewarning the slower cars that the race leader is approaching. The next car that our race leader is going to squeeze his way past is going to be Russ Lindsay's Team Orange powered by JMH Ginetta, which he is able to rather effortlessly pick off with that extra power that he's got at his disposal on the run in towards Agostini. And then the next car after that they'll be looking to try and side his way through and pass will be the Make It Happen Racing Ginetta, I would have thought, which will be Stephen Walton's car. There's former British GT racer Ron Johnson under attack from Chris Murphy at the wheel of the N24 Aston Martin. Good to see Ron in the series this weekend, who used to race in the British GT Championship in a Corvette some years ago. He's partnered up with current driver who's 2nd in the British Touring Car Championship, Tom Ingram, for this weekend, and they'll move out of the way whilst our 2nd place car, Steve Burgess, threads his way through, whilst Morgan Tilbrook is already the best part of 6 seconds up the road now and about to pick off another back marker. So through he goes, past Stephen Walton's Ginetta. Morgan Tilbrook will keep pressing on as hard as he possibly can. His lap times haven't really dropped whatsoever over the course of the race. A little bit of traffic last time through for him to deal with, a bit more this time, so that's the only reason we're seeing a tiny bit of drop off in his lap times. But when he gets a clear lap, he's straight back on it again, Morgan Tilbrook, and is looking good here to hand the car over into a handy position when Marcus Clutton takes over. And they also don't have any success seconds to worry about because of the topsy-turvy result yesterday, because of the awful weather conditions and the red flags coming out when they did. Only half points awarded, by the way, because it hadn't got to 75% distance. Then, yeah, Morgan Tilbrook has got no success seconds to worry about. Still got that fight also going on between the two McLarens. Andre Borodin doing a really, really good job of making sure that he keeps Paul Bailey behind. Paul Bailey was ahead actually on the previous lap, so wondering if they might have swapped over again this time through. What was the gap between the pair of them coming over the start-finish line? It was 0.7 of a second, yeah, so Andre Borodin has gone back through and ahead of Paul Bailey actually, so they have had a shuffle, those two. With 30 minutes to go, we're about 4 minutes away from the first pit window opening. And for that car there, Paul Bailey, he'll be handing the car over to Ross Wiley for the newer shape McLaren that lies ahead, Andre Borodin will hand the car over to Ed Peed for part 2 of the race. Ed, who we've seen runner-up in the Renault Clio Cup Championship, 3 times on the trot, wasn't it? 2003, 2004, 2005, Ed was runner-up in that series. So he'll be taking over the blue McLaren, and number 28 McLaren will be taken over by Ross Wiley, who was the 2014 British GT champion in the GT4 class. Ross, former champion of the Stars of Tomorrow karting series as well, if memory serves me correctly, some years ago. So that's the pros that are waiting to take over these cars that are still together, as they have been for several laps. But for the number 28, Paul Bailey, he'll be conscious that he doesn't need to overtake the car ahead. It's not going to affect the championship points that he'll pick up in GTO. He'll be conscious that, subject to official confirmation, just starting this race is enough to secure him the Group GTO title for this year. He'll also be conscious that that's a very rare McLaren that he's driving. Here's Charlotte Gilbert, race winner from yesterday, and making that little bit of history, becoming the first female to win a GT Cup race outright over the years. We've seen plenty of group wins for various ladies over the years, but we've never had an overall win. And yes, you could argue that there was luck along the way. Everybody really that won their group had a bit of luck yesterday, but for Charlotte, great call by her and the team to leave her out there. They were conscious that the race might be stopped because of the conditions. She was the only car that hadn't pitted. She did eventually pit, but as she rejoined the circuit, the red flag came out, and of course when a red flag comes out, you go back a lap, you go back to the previous full lap that was completed, and at that point she was leading the race because she hadn't pitted, and that was what gave her the overall win. So yes, luck, but well deserved, I've got to say. Good strategy by the team. Now what we're looking at here is John Dillon in 4th place, who has been caught by Seamus Jennings. So the Scott Sport Lamborghini Huracan under pressure from the GCAT Racing Porsche in the hands of Seamus Jennings. They'll be looking to try and see as to who might finish 4th and 5th in this race, but of course we are pre-pit stop at the moment. So for the number 61 Lamborghini, because of its problems and retirement yesterday, he's got no success seconds to worry about. For Seamus Jennings in the GCAT Racing Porsche, that finished 3rd in its group yesterday, so that's got an extra 10 seconds to remain stationary come the pit stop window. And that pit stop window for these cars is still a few minutes away from opening, about 7 minutes away from opening. But for the first batch of cars, the cars in Group GTA, Group GTH and Group GTB, their pit window will be opening in reality now, just a matter of minutes. 90 seconds time we'll see the first of the pit window open. So Seamus Jennings pushing hard, needs to try and stay in touch with the Lamborghini that lies ahead. Remember, John Dillon will hand the car over to Sandy Mitchell, the Porsche that sits behind Seamus Jennings. It will be Greg Caton that will take over that car. They both dive through and past Russ Lindsay's Ginetta to place a lap on it, who stays well and truly out of harm's way as the quicker cars try and thread their way through and past. And as they now head over the start-finish line, as soon as you get past one little bit of traffic, the next little bit of traffic is just up the road as well. But some of these cars that they are lapping will be diving for the pit lane in a matter of seconds' time, because next time they come through, the pit window could well be open for some of them. So onto the brakes. Different line taken by John Dillon going in towards the Wilson hairpin compared to the Porsche that sits behind. But they are pretty evenly matched at this stage of the race. Through the left-hander at Palmer, whilst our overall race leader is just about to thread his way out of the right-hander and make his way, I think, down the Bentley Straight. That would be for Morgan Tilbrook, who is leading now by 6.5 seconds from Steve Burgess. So Group GT3 car leading, Group GTO car in 2nd place. And for Morgan Tilbrook, he is now well and truly around lap number 13. And we are now literally 60 seconds away from the halfway point of the race, aren't we? So pit window should now be open for the first batch of cars. We're not quite at the half-distance point as yet, but if you are running in Group GTB, Group GTH and Group GTA, should be able to dive for the pit lane at the end of this lap, and their pit window only is open for 5 minutes. So along Snetterton circuit, it's really just one of 2 laps that you can pit, because if you stay out for a 3rd lap, you'd be pitting once the window had closed. So are we going to see a flurry of activity in the pit lane? Leading Group GTH is Josh Jackson, so that could be a car that dives to the pit lane to hand over to the pro Michael O'Brien. Have to wait and see. So another lap completed by Morgan Tilbrook. That now means that he is safely onto lap number 14, leading by 5.2 seconds from this car here. The man from Nottinghamshire, multiple Radical champion over the years, former UK and British quad bike champion was Steve Burgess many years ago. He sits there in second position and leads Group GTO. And then as for Richard Neary, well, the Mercedes is now 11.5 seconds adrift of the rest. And yes, as I expected, a flurry of activity. Ian Campbell is in to hand over to Ollie Webb. Looks like the number 44 car is in. That's John Whitehouse ready to hand over to Steve Ruston. I just saw, I think, in the background, another car diving for the pit lane as well, which I think was Richard Mason to hand over to John Lancaster. Another one of the Greystone McLarens. So, as expected, chunk of activity just starting to happen in the pit lane for the cars in Group GTA, Group GTH and Group GTB. And as for the cars towards the front end of the race, the more powerful cars, there is the car of Richard Mason in the pit lane that I spotted in the background diving in. As for the more powerful cars, well, they just have to wait an extra few minutes, so it's only when we get to the point of there being 21 minutes remaining in the race, so about 3 minutes time, is when the second of the pit windows will open. The first closes, the second opens, and that's where the cars at the sharp end then of the race overall can head towards the pit lane. Now this is the Fox Motorsport Ginetta that was coming under attack there. There's a queue in the pit lane as we await John Lancaster to get the car going. That's delayed Nick Phelps. It's delayed Josh Jackson as well. So that's the Group GTB leader and the Group GTH leader that have both been delayed in the pit lane because of the, I'm not going to say slow release, but for whatever reason, John Lancaster just couldn't get the McLaren into a gear and it coasting up the pit lane. There would have been, I'm sure, nothing intentional with that there. But it did delay a couple of cars coming into the pit lane, which might mean now that post-pit stop we'll have potentially a shuffle for the lead of Group GTH, the lead overall, because Josh Jackson's just about to give way to Michael O'Brien. He was leading the group. They've got no success seconds to worry about. So if they lose the lead of the group, it would have been that brief delay that probably caused the overtake. So number 50 Porsche, vacated by Carl Cavers, about to be taken over by Lewis Plato, former Sunoco Challenge winner, who we've seen a chunk of racing in both Radicals and the Porsche Carrera Cup GB over the years, Lewis Plato. We are still, however, about 1 minute and 3/4 away from seeing the pit window open for the second batch of cars, which means that we can still enjoy this battle that's going on between Andre Borodin and Paul Bailey, newer McLaren, that being the 750S, just ahead of the McLaren Can-Am, as it's called, based on an MP4 12-C. John Dillon also still coming under pressure from Seamus Jennings. There's been no let-up in the pressure there, but it's still just Lamborghini that hangs on to 4th place. Porsche, the GCAT Racing Machine, the number 33 car, sitting there in 5th position. With now just over 60 seconds to go before the first pit window closes. And then the second pit window opens, and the second pit window is for any cars that run in Group GTC, Group GT3 or Group GTO will all have to dive for the pit lane, and again they will have a period of time to conduct their pit stops. 6 minutes they will have to conduct their pit stops. So that literally means the top 15 cars the pit window will open for, because of course all of those are the cars that haven't pitted as yet really. They're not going to be able to pit this time through John Dillon and Seamus Jennings because they are less than 30 seconds away from pit lane entry, so it will be the next lap will be the earliest opportunity they'll be able to dive into the pit lane, because the pit window will be well and truly open by then, so they can't peel their way in this time through. So back over the start finish stand now we'll go, whilst this car here is moving ever closer towards the championship title. Now, if it were to retire, as long as it got to 70% distance, then it would still be classified as a finisher, the number 88 Mercedes. So we are going to be looking at what the best part of 35 minutes into the race would be 70% in terms of time, but it's distance we need to consider. And big smiles all round there in what is the ABBA Racing garage. They know that they are now a matter of probably just moments away from potentially being able to consider themselves as champion, but until that checkered flag comes out and the official results are confirmed, that never happens. It's always subject to official confirmation, but we're not quite there as yet. But everything at the moment, the stars are starting to fully align in the favour of the number 88 car. It might have lost the lead of the race, but that was just purely tactical and making sure they were staying out of trouble, Richard Neary, and he has done that. He's still built a nice advantage between himself and the 4th place car, that being John Dillon. There's about 16 seconds from Mercedes back to Lamborghini, 3rd back to 4th. This car here is sitting in 7th at the moment, which is Graham Tilley. He'll be handing the car over to Senan Fielding very shortly, and we should now start to see that flurry of activity in the pit lane for the second batch of cars, and indeed here they all come. So in comes Morgan Tilbrook, the familiar helmet of Marcus Clutton about to dive on board. Marcus, a former British GT champion from some years ago, dives on board. Here's the outgoing Radical Challenge champion for this year. Looks as though we've also got the number 96 Lamborghini in as well. That will be Chris Kemp giving way to Stuart Hall, and Richard Neary is in. So this is an important pit stop. As long as they get it right, make sure that they are staying out of trouble. It now will hand the lead of the race to this car here, the Steve Burgess driven Radical. There's no co-driver he needs to worry about for this weekend. He's been sharing the car with Ben Dimmock all season. Steve driving solo for this weekend, but he has not pitted, so he has opted to stay out for an extra lap. A little bit of tyre pressure adjustment just being done to the Control Pirelli tyres that all of the cars run in the GT Cup Championship. Richard Neary out of the car after a solid stint from him. Sam Neary just tightening up the seatbelts, and we'll wait for the thumbs up from the team that the time has ticked away and he can get the car rolling down pit lane. Out onto the circuit goes number 66, erstwhile leading McLaren. Of course, it won't be leading as yet because not everybody has pitted on this lap, but Marcus Clutton is safely on board that. Behind him down pit lane comes the McLaren of Ross Wiley now, the number 28 car. So out onto the circuit goes Marcus Clutton. There goes now Sam Neary out onto the track. And neither of those cars having any additional success seconds to worry about in the pit lane. And when are we going to see the new race leader, Steve Burgess, dive for the pit lane at this stage? I think nearly everybody else called into the pit lane that time through. Out goes Sandy Mitchell. He will make his debut really in GT Cup because he can't compete as a pro driver in the sprint races. He didn't get to race yesterday in the wet race, the pit stop race that we had, because of the clutch issues that the number 61 Lamborghini had. Steve Burgess comes in, so he comes into the pit lane. Out goes Senan Fielding, who's now taken on board the Nissan. Out goes Jamie Stanley, who's taken over from Laurent Demise at the wheel of the Ferrari, and in comes Steve Burgess. So there's no driver change here, just the opportunity to adjust the tyre pressures. A well-earned glug of water being handed to the man from Nottingham, and then he will look to try and propel that car back towards the sharp end of the race, Steve Burgess. He does, however, have to spend an extra 10 seconds in the pit lane compared to those that are off scratch. There goes Warren Gilbert. So back down pit road goes the number 9 car. An extra 10 success seconds to spend in there for Warren Gilbert. Should be sufficient, I would have thought, for him to hang on to the lead of Group GTC still, I would have thought. So watched on by Jensen Lunn, who he shared the car with all season. Back onto the track goes Warren Gilbert. In the debut season for this car, it has run so well and so consistently. I've got to say, they have, I think, scored points at every single round. And that is not wanting to put the commentator's curse on it whatsoever, but it has been a car that has just been unbelievably consistent. And are they going to finish the season with second place in the championship? Are they going to finish the season with third place in the championship? We'll give you a full rundown of the top 10 and pick out the group leaders once everybody has pit stopped, because I think everybody has largely been in and conducted the pit stops. However, the order will still take another lap just to fully sort itself through. It should be Marcus Clutton that will pick up the lead of the race, the number 66 McLaren, at the end of this one. And as long as we still continue to see the number 88 Mercedes of now Sam Neary circulate, that means that the championship title is just starting to edge away from this number 9 Lamborghini of Warren Gilbert. So 16 minutes of the race to go. It means now that the pit window has got about another 60 seconds to go, so anybody that hasn't pitted needs to be in the pit lane within the next 60 seconds or so, because once we get to 15 minutes remaining, then all of the pit windows are done and dusted. Now Sam Neary, traffic to deal with. He will try and dive past Michael O'Brien's Group GTH McLaren. That little bit of traffic is dealt with, and now the Mercedes is trying to close in on Steve Burgess. So let's give you a rundown of the order then, the way things will stand. Number 66, Marcus Clutton, will lead the race. Steve Burgess, the number 7 Radical, will lead Group GTO and is second overall in the race. And third at the moment is going to be number 88, which is Sam Neary, but he is attacking to try and make it second as they head down the Bentley Straight. He's too far away, however. Fourth at the moment will be the number 61 Lamborghini. That will be Sandy Mitchell that's taken over. Fifth will be the number 33 GCAP Racing Porsche, Greg Caton on board. Sixth will be the number 4 Nissan, which is now going to be Sennan Fielding, with seventh being the number 155 Ferrari of Jamie Stanley. Eighth place being number 47 Matt Manderson, who's now taken over the silver Aston Martin. Ninth place will be Warren Gilbert, number 9, who leads Group GTC still, and completing the top 10 now is going to be car number 24, which is the McLaren that's been taken over by Ed Peed from Andre Borodin. So that gives you the top 10. Leading Group GTH at the moment is that number 1 McLaren in the hands of Michael O'Brien. Leading Group GTB is the number 35 Porsche of Dino Zamparelli. And leading Group GTA is going to be Simon Orange, the number 67 Ginetta G55 Super Cup spec car. So that gives you the top 10. It gives you the group leaders at this stage, but already we're starting to see fastest laps come in because, of course, the pros have now taken over the cars, and instantly Marcus Clutton at the wheel of this number 66 Enduro Racing prepared McLaren is straight on it with the new fastest lap of the race. That, however, has already been bettered by Sandy Mitchell, who's taken over the number 61 Lamborghini from John Dillon. So Marcus Clutton was a 1 minute 50.7. Straight onto it in his first flying lap is the reigning British GT champion Sandy Mitchell with, as you can see, 1 minute 50.212 from the young Scotsman. So Marcus Clutton weeding his way past the traffic, through and past number 777, which is now going to be Tom Ingram that's taken over that car. Tom last raced in the GT Cup a full season. I think he did it in 2015. He did in GT Cup. Of course, he's been racing in the British Touring Car Championship for every single season since 2014 onwards. Currently lying second in the standings, having finished runner-up in the past, so he's taken over that number 777 car. This car here, Sandy Mitchell, is the car to watch out for now, a car that he knows very, very well with his exploits, both racing for Barwell Motorsport in Europe and in the British GT Championship, which he claimed the title with last year. He was partnered up with regular British touring car racer Rob Collard. Rob moving over from the BTCC to race in sports cars for the first time, and on their first season of racing as a partnership together, picked up the overall British GT Championship title, did Sandy Mitchell. Not having as good a run of it this year in the British Championship, but still at the sharp end. Still been on the podium a few times as Sandy. I think he's lying third in the overall standings, but it's the first weekend we've ever seen him in the GT Cup Championship. And I think both John Dillon and Aaron Scott, who runs Scott Sport, hugely impressed. Now that's a car that we're hoping that we could spot. So see the flapping paperwork on it and the flapping gaffer tape, and the fact that the door is different. That is because Mike Price got tangled up in a lap 1 accident earlier on, and Balf Motorsport didn't have a spare door. However, GCAT Racing did. So, however, Greystone GT did. So they lent a door to him. And that means that's why that car has now a subtly different livery, because it's got a different door on. What happened there? Right, Greg Caton and Dino Zamparelli, the two Porsches, have they had a coming together? Because they were both on the grass at Coram, the exit of the bomb hole, both looking as though they're able to continue. But how much time was lost in that final sector from the pair of them? Quite a chunk, I would have thought. Dino Zamparelli, yeah, 58 seconds through that sector. Suggests that something happened, because that's about 20 seconds slower than he should be going. There's a ding in the back end of the Porsche of Zamparelli. So I do wonder whether there's damage to the front end of the number 33 Porsche. We'll try and have a look next time through, but for the moment what Greg Caton is focusing on is dealing with some slower traffic that he needs to try and weave his way through and past, and he's managed to do that both on the exit of the Wilson hairpin and on the approach to the left-hander at Palmer. So down the straight in towards Agostini he will go for the lead of Group GTC at the moment. We just saw the two Lamborghinis go through there, and that's for the lead of the group actually. That is Warren Gilbert, who, having stopped in the pit lane for an extra 10 seconds, lost the lead of Group GTC to the number 96 Lamborghini that's now been taken over by Stuart Hall, because that car there, number 96, had no additional success seconds to spend in the pit lane. So Warren Gilbert was overtaken by that car due to the success seconds picked up yesterday. So that now means he is second in the group. He has to win the group. He has to keep his fingers crossed that the number 88 Mercedes doesn't finish the race or get to 70% distance of it. Well, as I say, the distance is done not by the amount of time, but it's done by the amount of laps that you cover. So if we convert the 50-minute race into 70% distance for time, that's about 35 minutes. Well, we're past that point. We must now surely be past 70% distance as well, because we've done 20 laps. So I think even if the number 88 Mercedes were to retire now, it would still have done sufficient laps so as to be classified as a finisher, so as to pick up championship points, and so as to potentially be the overall champions for this year. But it's not going to stop number 9, Warren Gilbert, pushing as hard as he can, because he will absolutely want to make sure that he does everything that he possibly can to try and pick up the Group GTC lead, which at the moment he hasn't got. There goes the Can-Am McLaren of Ross Wiley. Tom Ingram sitting behind him. Here comes Marcus Clutton, our race leader, about to complete lap number 21, with now less than 10 minutes to go in the 2021 championship season for GT Cup, which has had a mega season. Now, considering what everybody has been through over the course of the last 18 months with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's great to see people just wanting to come racing, and despite the difficulties and restrictions that we've all had to work under, we have had, without question, a huge field all season. We have had a high quality field all season, and yet again Butte Motorsport have listened to the customers, listened to the drivers, and have tweaked a few things for this year. I'm sure there'll be a few small tweaks for next year as well, just to make sure that we keep moving forwards. Now this car here, Sam Neary, up to second place. He got past Steve Burgess very early on into his stint, having taken over the car from his father a few laps ago. He is circulating 27.5 seconds behind Marcus Clutton, the race leader. But remember, Marcus Clutton and Morgan Tilbrook in their McLaren, whilst leading the race, are not a championship registered car, so they would not pick up the points for the win. And, well, even though this Mercedes doesn't need the points, finishing the race would be sufficient for them to scoop up the overall GT Cup Championship title for 2021 and follow in the footsteps of the likes of Simon Orange and Josh Jackson. It would also, I think, be the first Mercedes, if memory serves me correctly, to win the title overall. We've had Ferraris and Porsches and BMWs and McLarens and Bentleys and Aston Martins and Ginettas win the title over the year, but I don't recall a Mercedes ever having secured the overall title. I'm sure somebody will correct me on that if needs be, but if we have, it was a very long time ago that it happened. So we'll have to wait and see as to whether it is the first championship title for Mercedes overall, but I can't recall for the life of me that we have had a Mercedes win the overall title in the past, and checkered flag isn't out yet, so we'll keep that powder dry for the moment. Ed Peed trying to weave his way through and past the traffic. That's Dino Zamparelli's number 35 Group GTB Porsche. Got the GT3 McLaren is trying to go by. Picks it off on the approach in towards Palmer. So where will that put Ed Peed now that he's dealt with that particular car? I think that is going to put him still a reasonable way down through the order, but the timing system has been a little bit troublesome. That's 9th place that he is up to at the moment, so putting a lap on Dino Zamparelli's Porsche. 6.5 minutes now remaining. Last time through, Sandy Mitchell popped in another new fastest lap of the race as well. The young Scotsman, the number 61 Lamborghini, 1 minute 49.510 from Sandy Mitchell. Very quick lap indeed from him, and I think that now means that's the fastest race lap we've had all weekend from Sandy Mitchell in that one. So nobody has gone any quicker in any of the races. Yes, the two yesterday were wet, but that is certainly quicker than we managed the fastest lap in the race earlier on today. So Sandy Mitchell pushing hard, as ever he does, behind the wheel of a car. Right, okay, car number 22, 8-second penalty as a result of the pit stop being too short. So that was unfortunately the Richard Mason and John Lancaster car. Now I think that might have been why John Lancaster didn't pull away. Now that's the car, if you remember, right the way at pit lane entry end, it sort of didn't get away and blocked other cars behind, and that's maybe because they pushed it back a bit too early, realised the error that it was going to head down pit road, stopped there with it to try and let the clock tick away, and pit stop was still too short anyway. There's also a time penalty for the number 47 car as well, because of its pit stop being too short. So that is another car. That is the Ultimate Speed Aston Martin that Mike Brown started, that Matt Manderson drives, and that car is currently 8th in the race overall and will be picking up a time penalty as well. So those two cars, pit stops too short. Now they don't have a stopwatch on how long the car is stationary. If you were listening yesterday, there's a beam that they break at pit lane in, there's a beam that they break at pit lane out. We know how long the pit lane is, we know how long it takes to drive down it at 50 kilometres per hour, which is the pit lane speed limit, and we know every car has to be stationary for 60 seconds. So add the two together, from pit in to pit out, you know what the time should be. If it's shorter than that, you've done one of two things. You've either sped in the pit lane, or you've not remained stationary for the correct amount of time, or it could be a combination of the possible two. But either way, if you are too short in the pit lane, it's the time penalty that you're short, plus you have to call into the pit stop to do that for a stop-go penalty. So off goes John Lancaster, having served the stop-go penalty, and we will also see a further stop-go penalty going the way of the number 47 Aston Martin as well. Now Warren Gilbert is still pressing on at this stage. He has not been able to overcome the number 96 Lamborghini, which still leads Group GTC at the moment, and now Warren Gilbert is coming under pressure from a car that is trying to unlap itself from him, which is Tom Ingram's Ferrari. So through goes Tingram, picks up the place and unlaps himself in reality from that car, because that number 777 Ferrari is down in 22nd position at the moment. Warren Gilbert also is picked off by Benny Simonson there, and that would have been for position the red Ferrari going through, so that would have been a place lost for Warren Gilbert, and it would have been a place in Group GTC. However, it wouldn't have affected the championship points of Warren Gilbert. That's because the red Ferrari is not championship scoring this weekend. Now Steve Burgess has got his hands full here, and rather full indeed, of Sandy Mitchell, who has been flying. Another new fastest lap of the race for Sandy Mitchell last time through. Steve Burgess can afford the Lamborghini to go through. It won't affect his championship points, but it will mean he'll be off the overall podium. Onto the brakes they'll go. The more powerful Radical in a straight line should be able to pull away from the Lamborghini of Sandy Mitchell. So pendulum swings in favour of the Radical as they head down the start-finish line, as they head up towards Ritchie's Corner now with just 3 minutes remaining on the clock. Has Steve Burgess got enough in reserve to try and fend away the aspirations of Sandy Mitchell making his debut in the GT Cup Championship? Or can the young Scotsman pull the rabbit out of the hat and try and squeeze his way through? Well, he's trying around the outside at Wilson. He can't quite get the cut back on the exit of the corner, can he? No, not quite. So Steve Burgess will still have the advantage as they head up towards the left-hander at Palmer, but there's traffic just up the road to deal with as well, and that'll be the number 44 Steve Ruston driven McLaren that they'll need to try and weave their way through. But Mitchell's already got the job done on the way out of Palmer. He takes up 3rd position. Steve Burgess drops down into 4th place, but that is simply a GT3 car passing a GTO car, so it does not affect the point score for either of those two drivers, but doesn't stop them sticking their elbows out and having a good squabble over it. And Steve Burgess, why should he make it easy? Absolutely not. He wants the overall podium, but yeah, Sandy Mitchell just too good for him at that stage. And Sandy is already starting to now put daylight between himself and the Radical, which at the moment is now trying to thread its way through and past what is Charlotte Gilbert's Marcos. So we've got 2 minutes remaining in this race. Sandy Mitchell, you can just see the undertray of the Lamborghini flapping as it comes down the straight. Just underneath the car, you can see it bouncing up and down a little bit, but I don't think that's any significant cause for concern. And what we can probably now pretty much safely say is that that number 88 Mercedes of Sam and Richard Neary has reached the 70% distance, and even if it stopped out on track now, it would still be classified as a finisher. It would still pick up points, and therefore, yeah, it looks as though they are going to be picking up the championship crown for this year, but we'll wait until the checkered flag flies before we do that. The Ultimate Speed Aston Martin back out of pit lane. It's served its penalty as over the start-finish line comes the champion-elect. So Sam Neary, minute and 20 seconds away from seeing the clock tick to 0. There's still gazes of nothing but towards the screens and the footage in the Team ABBA Racing garage at this stage. They will keep the champagne on ice for the moment and cheer that car over the start-finish line, I'm sure, but this car is looking as though it is heading towards a victory in the final round of the GT Cup Championship for 2021. Morgan Tilbrook, partnered up with Marcus Clutton, claimed a win at Donington Park on the Grand Prix circuit, and it looks as though they are heading towards their 2nd overall win of the championship season. Up towards the braking area for Brundle and Nelson, still with 40 seconds to go on the clock, so they still might have to complete the lap they're on and do one more thereafter. We'll have to wait and see as to whether they make it over the start-finish line before the clock ticks to 0. I have a feeling they might do, you know, so penultimate lap I think is what they're on at the moment, and it looks so that car there is heading towards top honours in Group GTC, the number 96 car that was driven so well in the early stages by Chris Kemp. It's now in the hands of Stuart Hall. So 15 seconds to go. Is is Marcus Clutton going to blend out at the throttle? Is he going to get towards the start-finish line before or after the checkered flag? 5 seconds to go. So over the start-finish line, I thought it was nip and tuck as to whether he would have to do an extra lap. And yeah, one more lap to go. One more lap of agony as far as Team Abbott Racing are concerned. Sam Neary and Richard Neary, because they'll have to do this next lap that they are on before they see the checkered flag. But they are 29 seconds adrift of the race leader. But sufficient daylight between themselves and the car that's in third place, which of course is Sandy Mitchell, who is looking as though it is going to be 3 different manufacturers in the top 3, so looking as though the win is going the way of McLaren, Mercedes in second place, and the championship going towards Mercedes, and third place is going to be Lamborghini. But for Sam Neary, still traffic to deal with, and all it takes is one small mistake as you misjudge what you need to do past the back marker, and all of a sudden what has been a beautiful race, a fantastic season for them, can all come a little bit unpicked, but I think they've done sufficient now so as to very much head towards what is going to be the championship awards that will be taking place in a month or so's time. So Marcus Clutton safely on his way. This car here heading for second overall in this final race of the season. It's going to be second in GT3 in the race, in Group GT3, but championship title without question is going their way. And remember, every other championship title now has been stitched up, so we know who all the group champions are for this year, we know who the sprint champion is, we know who the sporting challenge champion is, and we have seen that the stars have certainly aligned in favour of the number 88 Mercedes, which is going to come home 30 seconds adrift of Marcus Clutton and Morgan Tilbrook's McLaren, which must be heading towards the checkered flag almost now. Here it comes, yep, out of the final corner. It is going to be a win in the final race, round 24 of the GT Cup Championship for 2021. Goes the way of the Enduro Motorsport McLaren of Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Clutton, who claim their second overall win of the championship season. So they take the checkered flag, but it looks as though the overall championship is going to be going the way of the number 88 Abbott Racing Mercedes, in the hands of father and son pairing, which is Richard and Sam Neary. And I think that will also mean this is the first time in GT Cup history we've probably had a father and son claim the championship overall as well. So through and over the start-finish line they'll go. That is enough. Subject to official confirmation, they are the champions in the GT Cup Championship for 2021. Sam Neary and Richard Neary come home to finish in second place. Delight for them, delight for the team. Steve Burgess comes home to finish in, well, what would have been, I think, let's have a quick look now. Is it third place for Steve Burgess? No, it's third place for Sandy Mitchell and John Dillon, but there was a 5-second penalty for transgressing circuit limits many times, which means that rather than finish 5.6 seconds up the road from Steve Burgess, they finish just 0.6 of a second up the road from him, I think is the way that that will work in the end. So Steve Burgess will still win Group GTO regardless, and then we'll pick up on the rest of our winners. Group GTC was secured by Chris Kemp and Chris Hall by the look of things. Yeah, Stuart Hall wins Group GTC. Group GTH going the way of Josh Jackson and Michael O'Brien. Group GTB going the way of Nick Phelps and Dino Zamparelli, despite the contact with that Porsche out there at Coram. And Group GTA, it looks as though Simon Orange is going to pick up the final win of the season. So there is number 9, Warren Gilbert. Those guys, Top Cats Racing, can be hugely proud of what they've done this year. And for Warren Gilbert and Jensen Lunn and the whole of the Top Caps team, they gave it everything all year. It was a brand new car to them at the beginning of the season, and they took it right the way towards the very final race of the season. Just came up that little bit short, but they'll be hugely proud of what they've achieved, and nice to see the newer Top Cats Racing car side by side with the older Top Cats Racing car, and that is husband and wife as well, Warren Gilbert and Charlotte Gilbert, who have had a mega season, and hopefully we'll see more of Top Cats Racing next year as well in the championship for what has been just an amazing year. the GT Cup Championship is back to full strength. Already we have released a calendar for 2022, which means that the championship is roughly the same as it was this year in terms of the way that we visit the circuits, with the likes of Donington Park and Brands Hatch and Snetterton, Alton Park, Silverstone, all on the championship programme. And already we gather that significant amounts of deposits have been taken for the full season slots available as well. So it's looking as though it was 2021 is a good season. 2022 is already looking a very good season and is probably going to surpass grid sizes that we've had for this year as well. So there's the final race winner of the 2021 championship season, Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Clutton, who did a good chunk of racing in a GT4 Mercedes at the beginning of the year that they ran in Group GTH, switched over to the GT3 car, and it's brought them a victory. Let's confirm the results then for the final race of the championship season. The win goes the way of Marcus Clutton and Morgan Tilbrook. In second place was Sam and Richard Neary, who lift the championship title. Third place goes the way of John Dillon and Sandy Mitchell, with Steve Burgess coming home fourth and being the winner of Group GTO. It was Tilly and Fielding that were there in fifth place. Lauren Demise and Jamie Stanley in sixth place, with Seamus Jennings and Greg Caton seventh. Andre Borodin and Ed Peed ahead of the car that finished in ninth position, which was Chris Kemp and Stuart Hall. And Paul Bailey and Ross Wiley secured the Group GTO title, having started that final race of the season. In 11th position, it was the car of Roy Millington and Benny Simonson ahead of Matt Manderson and Mike Brown. Warren Gilbert was 13th in the end, will be runner-up in the championship. Josh Jackson, partnered with Michael O'Brien, came home to claim the final Group GTH win of the season, with Ian Campbell and Ollie Webb finishing in 15th place, Mo Ritson and Tom Rawlings in 16th, David Holloway and Bradley Ellis in 17th, with Roy Johnson and Tom Ingram, who joins us for this weekend, in 18th place. Nick Phelps and Dino Zamparelli, the first home in Group GTB, in 19th place, and the first home in Group GTA was Simon Orange, who finished in 20th position. It was Mike Price and Callum McLeod who finished ahead of Ian Duggan and James Townsend, Alex Stevenson and James Kellett, Steve Ruston and John Whitehouse. Charlotte Gilbert finished in 25th place. 26th place was the Make It Happen Racing Jeanette ahead of Carl Cavers and Lewis Plato, with them Mason and Lancaster in 28th place, Lindsay and Collins in 29th place, and Chris Murphy, who was racing on his own today, but Michael Coker raced yesterday, finished in 30th position in the end. And that gives us the results for the final round of the championship. You can see delight there in the pit lane. Big smiles all round for Team ABBA Racing. They have had a mega season. Michelle Livings, I'm hoping, can bring us some sort of reaction from down there in the pit lane. And what a season it's been, Michelle. Subject to official confirmation, we have got our champions.
Hello, yes, I am here. And I'm about to have a word with the champions of the 2021 GT Cup. Here is Sam, who's the one that brought it home, but of course Richard was out there at the first part as well. Congratulations. Wow. How did it go? How did it go?
Yeah, really good. You know, that was race just about finishing, and I think we both drove a sensible race. Richard let past Morgan and let past the Radical, so no, we both played it sensible, and we finished now champions, so no, really happy. Yeah,
you did the job. You finished the race, which is what you needed to do. Yeah, some good, sensible driving from you in that first part.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing we wanted to do was push the car hard, break the car, or make a mistake and fall off. It made sense to let Morgan get away and just bring the car home. All I wanted to do was stay in front of John Dillon and Sandy Mitchell's car, because we were trying to score maximum points.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, job done. You must be thrilled to bits. You've had a great season, haven't you, the two of you?
Yeah, it's been really good. It's been a great championship, and we've enjoyed being here with you all.
Yeah. Can we expect to see you back maybe for 2022?
Yeah, I think you'll see us here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
You're up for that?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations from us all, and it's lovely watching your journey as well this whole season. And so there you go, Mark. We have our champions. It has been decided. It's been a great season. I know you've enjoyed it, haven't you?
It's been a fantastic season, and the one good thing, Michelle, hopefully we can do it all again in 2022.
Well, I do hope so. The sun is setting here in Snetterton, and also on the 2021 GT Cup Championship. For this year, that is it. Do keep up to date with all things GT Cup on all the social media. You can find us on Facebook and on Instagram as well. And of course, we will be back very, very soon next year. In fact, we've actually got the calendar all ready for you for 2022, so have a look at this. So we've got Donington on the 9th and 10th of April, that's where we'll be starting. Brands on the 30th of April, the 1st of May as well. Then we'll be back here in Snetterton on the 11th and 12th of June. We've got Alton on the, is it Alton Park? Yeah, on the 9th and 10th of July. Silverstone on the 30th and 31st. Then we've got Donington on the 17th of September, and then back here in Snetterton on the 8th and 9th of October. So there you have it. That is the 2022 calendar all set. We hope that you'll be able to join us for that. We're really, really looking forward to it. Hope you've enjoyed this season as much as we have. But for now, from Snetterton and all of us here at the GT Cup Championship, it's goodbye.